Hello and welcome back to another episode of Balancing Business and Babies. Today I am joined by Carly Hickey. Carly is a mum of a 5 and a 3-year-old, so very similar in ages to my little boy. I've got a 4-year-old, for those of you that don't know, so very similar. Carly is also a Canadian registered nurse, but she's been specifically kind of working with adult intensive care for around 12 years now. And she helps adult children and seniors prepare for aging, illness and end-of-life care, something that I'm very aware of. My mum was actually a nurse. She used to work with, she started off working in A&E. That was where she trained. Accident and emergency, I don't know if it's the same in Canada. And then for 25-30 years she went into working with the elderly and end-of-life care, so very familiar with that. So yeah, lovely to have you on the show, Carly. It's really nice to meet you.
It's such a pleasure to meet you too. Thank you so much for this invitation.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I love having people coming on and telling their stories. And just sort of with regards to nursing and having a 5 and a 3-year-old, how on earth are you kind of managing to have such a kind of an impressive career in nursing, and then you've got your business as well? And I just wanted to kind of have a chat with you. So do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself in a bit more detail and how you're kind of managing nursing and running a business as well?
Well, thank you. Yes, so I was a bedside in hospital ICU nurse for 12 years and then had my kids and really fell in love with them, obviously, and had to pivot the time constraints of shift work. It was absolutely heartbreaking to leave the bedside. I love adult intensive care, but I really didn't want to miss that very short-lived time of when kids are kids and they're your babies. And so the 12 and 13-hour shifts just didn't align with my family values. But I wanted to stay close to, my passion for intensive care. And intensive care is a specialty that really tugs at your heartstrings. It's very fulfilling work, but there's also a lot of gaps in our healthcare system in Canada. And from my conversations with professionals globally, these gaps are pretty familiar and felt in many different countries. And so one of them being the over-medicalization at end of life that occurs because families haven't engaged in the proactive conversations to guide that decision making. So I really wanted to stay close to my kids, have flexibility as a mother. My husband's job is very busy, but I also wanted to create a solution. And so that's when I decided to start my own consultation practice. And so balancing that, I invest the spare time that I have in the business. It's definitely more of a full-time project now in balancing that with part-time grad school. But, just trying to strike the right balance between work, family, and supporting, the business. One thing that I heard that was a really great piece of advice is, don't feel pressure to grow very, very fast if finding the balance is important to you. There's so many entrepreneurs that just sink every spare minute into building the business to achieve that growth quickly. But I'm very intentional that I really like my work as a lactation consultant. I enjoy the families. I enjoy my life as a mom and a wife. And I also enjoy kind of nurturing this business and seeing it grow. And now part of my strategy in going back to school is to support a greater audience, through the business as a nurse practitioner.
I think it's one of the, speaking with the parents that I have spoken to and myself included, that have, gone on to create their own businesses sort of around their children post having children, is that what you were saying is to not sort of get caught up in that you've got to start the business, you've got to get it all off the ground, like you've got to be more intentional with it as to why you're doing it and finding that, remembering what your purpose is as to why you're starting that business, i.e. you want more time with your children or you want more time with your family. And it was something I struggled with, and it's, I think, something that most of the people that I've spoken with have struggled with. So I think that's kind of an important message to get out there, is to remember the reason that you're starting it. And I like that, what you said about being more intentional with it and your planning and planning out your hours and things like that you're going to work, or the days that you're going to work, and just always keeping that as a focus in your head as to why you're doing this and what you're doing it for. And it is a big shift, I think, as well, from going from being like an employee to sort of having your own business. You still always got that mindset of you have to kind of unlearn everything that you've learned when you were being an employee. When you sort of go from, working for someone to working for no one except for yourself. And I still, to this day, I have to keep reminding myself that I'm not answerable to anyone, even my clients. I'm not answerable to them. I'm not working for them. I'm not employed by them. They're working with me as a client, and I still have to kind of remind myself of that. So yeah, it's like you say, being intentional with it. So what does a typical day look like for Carly, managing both the career and the kids at the moment? What's your typical day kind of look like?
Well, now that in Canada, kids have started to go back to school, most are already,
Yeah, I started this week.
Oh yeah. My son goes back to school. He starts in the morning, drop him off at the bus. My daughter is home 2 days a week with me. So on daycare days, I'll drop her off at daycare. And then I'll follow a time block schedule. And so that time blocking, I feel, is really important for my productivity. And that looks a little bit different day to day. There might be some time blocking for my readings or my coursework. There might be time blocking for, business meetings or projects that I have to do to move that business forward. But it is all quite balanced. And I ensure each day I get at least a 30-minute little exercise break, go out for a walk around my block, take the dog for a walk. I find that, especially during the pandemic, when exercise centers were shut down and I didn't have that exercise release, it definitely affected my feeling of balance. And when that's out of whack, it's a problem. And I think it's really important for busy parents, to prioritize that self-care for whatever gives that restorative feeling of filling your own cup, because you can't pour into someone else's cup if yours is empty. Really giving space for that little piece for myself each day. And then you fall into evening pickups and following through the extracurricular activities of the day, whatever that might be. If I'm down at my hospital, then I'm sort of off the schedule. My spouse takes over, or we have caregivers or babysitters, family that is willing to help out with drop-offs and such. And then I just do my shift and come home at the end of the day. In terms of meal planning, sometimes I'm able to, get meals on the table, and sometimes we lean into pre-made meals that are prepared at our local grocery store. And I think there's so much pressure to be this mom that does everything. And I've just made peace with the fact that my kids are happy and fed with healthy food. And if I didn't make it that particular day, that's okay.
Yeah. I've got into a habit, unfortunately, of following a lot of like what do they call them, like mummy vloggers and things like that on TikTok. And I love following them because it is kind of, there are some parents out there and I'm looking at it and thinking, oh, at least I'm doing better than they are at the moment, and I have those days where it kind of boosts me a little bit. But the ones that I do follow, I find myself sometimes doing that thing where you're getting a very small snapshot of someone else's life, and you think, how are they getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and they're cleaning their whole house, and then they're cooking a full course breakfast for their kids before they go to school, and then they're bathing them and showering them before school, and they come home from school and they're doing all these sort of Montessori style games with them and things like that. And I'm thinking, I struggle getting my kid up out of bed in the morning to get to school, and I'm literally like running him out the door with a piece of toast, and I'm thinking, how on earth are they doing it and I'm not doing it? And you do find yourself judging your life over other people, and I've stopped following them now because it wasn't doing my mental health any good. And like you say, my kids are happy, they're healthy, and that's the most important thing. But yeah, I've had to sort of look at it and go, just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean that we have to do it. We've found what works for our family, and that's the most important thing, is that the kids are healthy.
I absolutely love that. And actually, as a lactation consultant, one of the things that I definitely support new mothers with is protecting their mental health, because there is such an overwhelming pressure to exclusively breastfeed. And I know that as a lactation consultant, that is my goal, is to help people breastfeed or chest feed or feed their babies however they, and I certainly experienced that pressure. As a nurse, you should be exclusively breastfeeding. And when it doesn't go well, or there's a medical reason why you can't make enough milk, then you really put that back on yourself and put a lot of pressure to do that. And I white knuckled my way through those first few months of feeding my child, and things weren't really going well. And my lactation consultant said, FedisBest. And I just really appreciated that we had to accept that we had to start artificial feeding. I was happier. My son was happier. He actually had cow's milk protein allergy or sensitivity.
And mine did, yeah.
And it was absolutely horrendous. And finally, when we found like a hypoallergenic type of formula that he could tolerate, we went through so many. He was a happier baby. He started gaining weight, and that was a lot easier. And so that's when I really wanted to support moms with a FedisBest approach. Of course, advocating and supporting education around lactation, breastfeeding, but also making space for, if we have to start formula was a miracle, and used in the right circumstances, it can be life-saving. And another thing that I heard once was a teacher had said, I can tell when a child is not in a happy home. I can't tell if they've been breast or bottle fed, but I can tell if they have a happy mother. And I can't remember where I had heard that, but maybe it was, some social media post. But I also reiterate that to parents who really struggle with accepting the need to formula feed. And in particular, I do work with moms in NICU, and they have low milk supply because of the stress and other confounding factors, separation from baby. And so we really try to balance that advocacy for breastfeeding, but also giving themselves a little bit of grace and space to, be kind to themselves, because it's not always easy and straightforward.
No, it was when I had my son. He's my only son. I've only got the one. I had sort of decided quite early on in my pregnancy that I wanted to bottle feed, purely because I struggled to get pregnant for a very, very long time, and I've got a lot of health issues. I've got thyroid problems and things like that, and I'm on levothyroxine, and I've got fibromyalgia, so I take painkillers and things like that for that. And breastfeeding, even though the doctor had said to me, probably won't transfer through, you're not on anything damaging. I don't drink alcohol, so that was never an issue. But because I'd struggled for such a long time to get pregnant, I was very aware that I didn't want to do anything that may harm him down the road. In the back of my head, I was thinking, I don't want to run the risk of anything like my tablets sort of transferring through to him and causing him a problem and things like that. So it always sort of set my mind that I was going to formula feed. But then after I had him, because he was born in the first lockdown and he was born by emergency C-section, I was literally left in the room. My husband was allowed to come for the C-section. He spent 40 minutes with us afterwards, and then he was told he had to leave. He wasn't allowed to stay. So I was literally left in a room on my own with this brand new baby boy that I'd had, and after being cut open, I was in agony. So I never had any of this kind of nurse input. They didn't come into the room, and they actually came and said to me, we're really sorry, we're not allowed to come into the room unless it's in an emergency situation. We're not allowed to help at all. She said, normally we would take the baby to the nursery and let them sleep while you have a rest for a little bit. But she said because of the COVID situation, they weren't allowed to do that. I never had any of the lactation specialists either, and my milk never came in. I think maybe it could have done with maybe a bit of support and knowing, maybe a bit of like massage techniques, maybe it might have come in afterwards. So when we got home, I decided I was going to bottle feed anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But my son automatically started trying to latch. Even when he was there, he was doing it sort of naturally. So I hadn't gone back on my tablets at this point. So I thought, well, maybe I'll let him, I'll let him try and see if he can. And he latched straight away. I could feel he'd latched. He'd got a really good grip there. But he was going for quite a while and nothing came out. I never had any colostrum come out. I tried when I was pregnant because they say to get it in a syringe, don't they, when they're born, and give them the colostrum. But I never had anything come out. So I was a bit kind of sad, really. But I think maybe if I'd have had a lactation specialist, maybe because he was latching so well, they could have given me some pointers, or maybe the GP could have given me some tablets to help bring the milk in. I don't know whether that's a thing, but yeah, it never happened for me. And then we'd chosen the formula, and then we ended up with the cow's milk protein allergy. That was horrific. That was not nice. He's not allergic anymore, fortunately. He's on cow's milk, he has dairy, he's absolutely fine. I think it's quite common for them to have a rash as well with a CMBA.
Yeah.
My son never had a rash, but he just had persistent bad stomachs, crying, pain. You could tell it wasn't just a cry for, attention, or I want to cuddle, or it was there's something wrong cry. And eventually I took him down to the doctors quite a few times, I have to say, before they ever diagnosed him. And they said, look, just try changing the formula. As soon as we changed the formula, it was like we got a different child. It was like as if we'd taken him back to the hospital and picked another one up. He slept better, he was eating better, he just started to look healthier. So yeah, it was a big thing for us changing the formula. And once we'd kind of got him settled on that formula, he was absolutely fine.
And, especially having CMPA baby with your first child.
Yeah.
You're trying to find your maternal instincts or your parental instincts and figure it out. And it makes it so much more challenging to feel like you're doing the right thing or that you're a good parent. And I remember thinking, I'm a healthcare provider. My husband's a healthcare provider. Like, what are we doing wrong? This baby, I feel, cries for 8 to 12 hours a day, and there should be sleeping for 8 to 12 hours a day. Like, just that inconsolable crying because of the discomfort. And I just felt like such a failure as a mother. And it really broke my heart. And then until we figured out that we had to supplement, and I was killing myself trying to pump and make enough milk. And finally, when I just resigned to giving some formula, it was actually like the full dairy formula actually made his symptoms much worse. And then I realized, oh my gosh, there must be something to do with dairy. And that's when we switched. We went through a few different varieties, and then we went to a hypoallergenic formula. And that's where he really started to thrive. But about a year, he also had patches of eczema, just generalized all over his body. That rash that you mentioned, we had that. And then when we were on the milk ladder, which I think was created by he actually had very severe eczema where we had to do wet wrap therapy on his thighs, forearms, elbows, and legs. We had to send him to bed in these full bandages to rehydrate his skin. But after, I would say, 6 months or so, it was improving. But wow, what a ride that whole thing was. And I think, going back to balancing babies and business, that was a phase of life where my career took a backseat. Like, I was not even thinking about working. It was just, how do I support this family? And once we kind of got through all of that and the pandemic had settled a little bit, then the flow changed back to reprioritizing, getting to work and having a little something for myself that was socially stimulating, socially connecting with peers. And it's wonderful to stay home. For many people, love to stay home with their kids, but I definitely missed that peer interaction, especially during the pandemic. We had also moved cities. And so I left my entire social circle from my old city into the new city. So we had landed the GTA, the Greater Toronto area, in the fall of 2020. And I grew up here, but I didn't know anyone. All my friends had moved away. And so it's not like you could even socially distance at a park or go on like a socially distant walk at the time. It was really hard to kind of meet friends with a 18-month-old. So I was very happy to find that balance with family life and career life when the time was right.
Yeah, yeah. I am one of my, well, she's my closest friend now, because I had the same problem as you. Because of lockdown, I wasn't allowed to go to any of the like mother and baby groups and things like that, so I didn't meet anyone. But I think I mentioned this on another episode that I did. My best friend now that I've known since my son was probably about 3 months old. We met on app that I recommend thoroughly. I talk about it quite a lot on here. For anyone that doesn't know it, it's actually a parenting app, but it's called Peanut. I don't know if you have it in Canada, or I call it Tinder for mums. That's what I call it, because it literally works exactly the same way as Tinder. You put in your profile, your bio. So, I'm a mum, I've got a 4-year-old and he's a boy, and I do this, I like doing that, and what your hobbies and interests are. And then if you like the look of any other parents, you can swipe left if you like them and swipe no if you don't like if they're too far away or their kids aren't the same ages. And then when you both match with each other, then you can start talking. And that was how I met my best friend, through Peanut. So it was a lifesaver, that app was, through lockdown. It was a big thing to be able to. It was the only way I could talk to other parents other than my husband. So, and he was working a lot as well. He's a butcher, so he was working throughout lockdown for quite a lot of it. So quite a lot of the time I was on my own. So yeah, Peanut was a really good way for us to kind of feel like I was still connected to the world and not kind of locked up in my bedroom with my little boy.
That's amazing. And, it's interesting. When you become a parent, you change. And the friends who, you were friends with, you definitely keep those friendships. But in particular, if they don't match your parenting style, say
it becomes
for
difficult.
CMP, it can. And, for CMPA babies, I really had to stick to our routine for naps because he never napped. And I became a lot more strict with my routine and had to put up boundaries to say, stroller walks don't work for us. And because that was what worked for my child. And so I noticed that certain friendships that I had just changed. And then people that I didn't know well, we bonded deeply through our alliances as we became parents. And so it was just interesting that your sense of self as a person kind of changes, and you don't disregard or drop those friendships, of course, but they just change. And I think that kind of those friendships follow a normal life journey of their own.
100%. I think it's you don't realize, I think, probably at the time, but when you start looking back on it, you realize how different you've become post having children. Like when I look back on my sort of prior to having my son, I can't remember really who I was then. I only really remember myself as being a mum now, but when I look back on photos and things like that, or old videos that I've got of myself when I was younger, and I started thinking, it seems like a totally different person to me, and it is because I am a totally different person. My priorities have changed, my life has changed since having my little boy, and for the better, I might add, but I have changed 100% from the person that, didn't have a child. And that was, I think, probably why I didn't have any friends. I've got one sort of friend at the moment, which is my friend that I met on Tinder for Mums. And it was because a lot of my friends when I was at high school and older, in my 20s, they had children a lot younger. So they were having children when they were in their late teens, early 20s. I didn't have my son until I was 32, so I was quite old for my first child. But I separated quite a lot from my friendship groups because they had children a lot younger. They were obviously going off doing the mum things. They were going to the parenting groups, they're taking their kids to the soft plays at parks. They couldn't come out with me as a single girl. They had to have childcare and things like that, and I was single, so I didn't want to go to the parenting groups, and I wanted to go to the pub, and so we kind of we just sort of separated because we were living separate lives then, and I lost a lot of my friendship group because of that, and I can 100% see it in myself now. I can see why they were doing what they were doing then, because it's what I'm doing now. I'm doing the parenting thing now. I'm just a little bit later. I'm just doing it a lot later in my age.
Oh, I hear you. And I feel, later 20s, early 30s is, a lot of what I'm seeing. And I think however that kind of rolls out works. And just finding that social connection in those really, really dark times of early parenthood, that first 3-4 month, even 6-month stretch. I know that I had a really good friend. We had our babies like within a few weeks of each other. Our phones would always be on do not disturb overnight, but there were many midnight or 3 a.m. text chats, and just having that little lighthouse in the night, that friend that is in it with you. Oh, there's just something so comforting with that. For my spouse and I'm a night person, he's a day person, and it was very natural for me to take on, the being up all night, feeding at night, and he was happy to let me rest and nap during the day, and that worked just kind of well for how we are, and we felt like we didn't need 2 exhausted parents. I didn't mind if he slept and he didn't mind if I napped. And, I think having that team approach is something that really valued, and made sure to tell him. It was very intentional about saying, thank you for letting me take a nap. And I know there's people on here probably saying, like, who are thinking like, oh, why would you thank your husband for letting you nap? But it's just more about being intentional with verbalizing the gratitude.
It's just respect, isn't it? Yeah.
And noticing and appreciating, like saying to your partner, thank you for this. And we say, hey, thanks so much for emptying the dishwasher. Thanks for turning over the laundry. We are so intentional with our gratitude towards each other, because there are times where we can get snippy and, kind of at each other. And the opposite of that is really leaning into reinforcing that you're noticing what each other's doing around the house. And so we make that a really important part of our life.
I get that. It's not a, what was the kind of word? It's not kind of,
it's not like a submissive.
Yeah, exactly. You're not thanking them because it's an expectation of them. You're not thanking them for that reason. You're thanking them as a way of respecting them, really, that you appreciate them, and that you understand that my husband does certain things, I do certain things, we're very similar, we say thank you, for doing certain things. And I had this conversation with someone the other day because I'd seen someone on TikTok very similar to what you were saying, that there'll be people out there going, oh, why'd you do this and why'd you say that? But she'd said something on TikTok that when she goes out with her friends, she doesn't ask for her husband's permission, or she doesn't sort of tell her husband, she just goes. And everyone in the comments section was saying, oh yeah, good on you, blah, 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 blah. I said I wouldn't do that. I don't, because I don't go out, but if I was to go out, I would say to my husband, is it okay if I go out? I'm not saying that to him for permission. I'm not asking for his permission to go out. I'm just making sure that we haven't, double booked each other, that he's not going out as well, or that he hasn't got a reason as to why he can't be at home with the children, or that he's not feeling, sick, or that there's something else not wrong. It's not a permission thing. It's just a respect thing. And he does exactly the same with me. If he goes out, he says, I might be a little bit late tonight. Is that okay? He's not asking me for my permission to be late. We don't do that, but we're just telling each other that might be a possibility, therefore giving each other a bit of a heads up on a situation. So I completely understand where you're coming from with saying thank you. And like you say, it's not a submissive thing. It's just, being polite and having respect for your partner who is helping, or parenting, not helping, parenting.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's that whole premise of connect instead of direct, or connect before direct. There is so much education in, communication strategies, and with the right approach, you can really save that relationship, or instead of demanding things, create less tension on that fabric of your relationship. It's all of those little things that kind of pick apart relationships over time, that we don't see those micro tears in those bonds. And I think that it's just a small thing, but I think anything that you can do to secure and repair can be really restorative, especially when you look at a family unit. and trying to keep that family unit together for the sake of children and,
Exactly. And I think when you've got children as well, I think it helps with the way they view relationships and the way that they view families. If they see mummy and daddy being polite to each other and saying thank you to each other and helping each other and being affectionate to each other, I think they're going to pick up on that. It's going to impact them, not just sort of mentally, because they're going to realise that they're in a happy, stable home when mummy and daddy are happy and love each other and are showing each other that they love each other. But also they're picking up on that respect from each other. So they see mummy and daddy saying thank you or please to each other. The children will then in turn start saying please and thank you because that's what they've picked up from their family. But if they see mummy and daddy constantly arguing or, not saying thanks and just walking out the door, the next time the child wants to be able to do that, they're just going to start walking out the door. They're not going to tell parents where they're going because they haven't been shown that kind of respect from their parents doing it to each other. So why should they do it to you? So
Absolutely.
I think it's really important actually to kind of keep that in a family.
I love that point. Yes, the role modeling,
Yeah.
can be so impactful. Kids listen and observe so diligently. And I think all of these passive things really feed into that nature nurture. The kids are who they are, that's their nature. And there are things that in their environment they can pick up very passively, good things and bad things. So, yeah, I think I love that there is that support for that type of family peace in the family home.
Yeah. I think we worry, we're as parents, we're very aware of kind of the more noticeable and very sort of immediate things that we shouldn't do with our children. If you've got a 5-year-old, you wouldn't show them an 18 rated movie, for example. We all know that. You don't give your children sharp objects. You don't give a baby small objects. We know the obvious things. Everyone knows that. It's kind of sort of an unspoken but very obvious thing to not do with children. But when it comes to kind of the little things like saying please and thank you, you forget how much of a sponge your child is, and they pick up on, like you say, they pick up on so much of the little things, and it's those little things that we probably don't always sort of pay attention to. We try and watch how we're swearing in front of children. We try not to swear in front of them. We all know that we shouldn't do that. But saying please and thank you to your husband or your wife and showing your husband or wife respect is probably a bigger thing to focus on, I would say, than worrying about what your kid is watching on the TV or how much iPad time they're having. Or I think that's probably a bigger focus, actually.
Absolutely. And, this reminds me of something that about a month ago, I recently implemented just for myself, which is this buzzword that we're hearing, practicing gratitude. About 6 months ago, I bought a journal and was trying to do it every single day, but then I kind of fell off the bandwagon. I wasn't making time for the physical journal. So now what I do is I have notes on a little note on my iPhone. I just open it up and, at the top of the note, the chronology starts with like the latest day. So like day 1 is at the bottom of the note and day 28 is at the top of the note. So I don't have to keep on scrolling all the way down, but I just write in 3 things that I'm grateful for that day. And I've been doing it and it's really changed and being intentional about writing it down. It's really just reframed all of these things. And now that I've been doing it for a while, I actually take things that I would perceive as grievances specifically and flip them into a positive. So I had, a very hard emotional day with one of our children, lots of crying, lots of explosive behavior, a lot of fighting with their sibling. And I was just really maxed out with my patience as a mom. And what I wrote for that day was, I'm so glad my child feels safe to share their feeling.
Yeah.
Just kind of taking whatever bothered you that day and flipping it into a positive really helps. But what I've been doing at the dinner table or during any meal is saying, what's something good that happened today? Or what are you grateful for today? And teaching gratitude to our 3 and 5-year-old. And, our 3-year-old doesn't always understand like the whole concept of gratitude, but I'll say, what made you feel really good today? What made your heart feel really good today? And she'll say, my bunny stuffy, or just something. But it really kind of sets those pathways in motion to intentionally think of, we can be so negative about all of these little things that happen. We really have to put effort into rewiring our brain to appreciate the good. And I think especially after the time that we just went through with the pandemic, just really trying to shift those pathways into a more positive thought process. We really, I think as a society, have to put effort into that, whereas there's really no effort in perseverating on the negatives, but we have to really put effort into rewiring the positivity of the day-to-day.
I could probably do with doing that myself, to be honest, because I'm quite I'd say reactive. I think probably I'm quite a reactive person. I always have been. I try not to with the kids. It's something I'm working on myself. I try and do. I don't like the term because I think it a lot of people have a misconception of what it actually is, but I try my best to do gentle parenting as best as I can. The reason I don't like the term gentle parenting is I think a lot of people think that it is permissive parenting, and permissive parenting is where you let your kids kind of run riot over you. You don't discipline them, you don't say no to them, you just let them do whatever they want to do. That's not what gentle parenting is, but I can see why people come up with that because of the name. I try and do is get my son to understand why he's feeling the way that he's feeling. So, is he feeling angry? Is he feeling upset? Why is he having that kind of emotion? Once he's kind of in a big, when he's having a big feeling about something, my immediate sort of thing isn't to correct the behavior, it's to bring him down from that level. I need to get him down to a level where he is able to talk to me. When he is down at that level, that is when I will correct the behavior, because when he is in that moment of having a meltdown or having a tantrum, their brains have switched off. They are not in the learning stage of development. They're in the meltdown stage. Their brains don't think like that. So I need to bring him down from the level. Once he's calm, then we sit and we talk about it. And I will say to him, that behavior was unacceptable. We don't do that. I will then sort of teach him on what he can do in the future. So we don't do this, but we do this instead. And that is when I will teach him something to do instead of that existing behavior. There's a big part of me that, like I say, because I'm quite a reactive person, and he does, especially now because he's 4, the attitude that he's got on him sometimes, I don't know where he's got it from, but he said to me the other day, he was standing on a chair. It was about the 6th time I told him to not stand on the chair. Jacob, sit down, put your bum on the chair. We don't sit, chairs on for standing. You sit on the chair, not, no, kept doing it, kept getting back up. He'd sit on it and then get back straight up again. And I think one of the times I said it to him, and I said, Jacob, if you don't come down off that chair, Mummy's going to come and move you. And he looked at me dead square in the face and he went, yes, sir. I went, and I had to sort of stop myself from laughing, because I was like, I don't know where you've got that from. Where have you got that from? But he literally he looked at me and he went, yes, okay, all right. You're 4. Where has this attitude come from? So
my goodness, yes.
Yeah, he does trigger me sometimes quite a lot with his behavior, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I just need to have a moment. I just need to go and take myself off. I can't deal with this at the moment. I'll go and I'll have a 30-second kind of, breathing session to myself in another room, and then I'll go back in when I've sort of brought myself down a little bit. But yeah, it's difficult, but I do try with it. I probably could do with doing the journaling thing, because it's something I need to try and balance myself a little bit better than I do.
Yeah, and I believe in keeping things simple. Like, if we make it really hard to change our habits, and you have to have a specific journal and a pen and a time of day to write quietly, we have to make it easy for the stage of life we're in. Whoever has a smart device will have electronic little notepad app. Open it, 3 things that happened that were good that day, and that's it. And it can just really over time accumulate and create a more positive pathway in your mind of, especially when and then it becomes innate. So if something bad happens, if somebody honked at you as you're driving, I used to be like, why did they honk at me? But now I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel bad for them. They're in a rush, or I feel bad for them. Like they're really stressed out. It just becomes more automatic to the point where you don't have to journal, and it's established that habit more permanently. And as you were mentioning your story about your son, something kind of popped into my head, which I tell myself a lot these days. Like, I came across it on social media, but it's, parenting is hard for good parents.
Yeah.
And the people who are invested, the people who really want to raise great kids and are conscious of the decisions they make and the impact that they have on their children, especially when it comes to shame and guilt. I think that's where gentle parenting came from. And we definitely gentle parent, but we also, I would say we more hybrid parent. We definitely start with a gentle approach, but kids test boundaries, and not every child aligns with a gentle approach in terms of their personality. So my daughter, I could just look at her with like a stern mom look and she'll like start crying, but my son will push boundaries. And my husband and I really leaned into gentle parenting. And when it got to a certain point, it just was not helping him with his behavior. And so we ended up seeing a family psychologist for guidance. And that's what she said. She said, there's this pressure to gentle parent on social media. Everyone's talking about it, but it doesn't align with every child's personality. And that made me feel better. Now, it doesn't mean I'm authoritative disciplinarian, but we definitely start off with a very, very gentle approach, 1-2 chances, and then we tighten those boundaries and, to course correct that behavior. And it's not, we go with the idea, we correct behavior that is harmful to others, disrespectful to, people in the family, a danger to themselves, or a danger to others, or will damage the house in some way, like permanent markers in the kitchen or whatever. We correct those things, but we also try to kind of let them explore their space. And I think that aligns too with gentle parenting. It's not living in a very tight and rigid space and just letting kids be kids. So as type A healthcare providers, that was hard for us initially, but we've adapted.
I think I'm very similar. I like that, actually. I'm going to start saying that. A hybrid parent. I like that term, but I really don't mean to cause offense by this to anyone that's listening. But I do think, because you said your son is the one that pushes the boundaries, and it's my son as well that is completely different. I've got a stepdaughter. She's 10 in January. She was not like my son when she was his age. She was, if you gave her a piece of paper and a colouring book and some pens, she would sit for hours just colouring and minding her own business or playing on her own and sitting reading a book. You could just literally just leave her on her own. If you leave my son on his own for 5 minutes, he's upside down on the sofa with his pants off, or a ball has gone through the TV, or he's running after the cat and it's the 78th time that I've told him in the last 5 minutes to leave the cat or the dog alone. He is like a one man but a one child hurricane, my son. He's amazing. He's so polite, but he is a bit of a nightmare sometimes. And like you say, the gentle parenting thing, he's very good for 4. He will come to me and he'll say, "Mummy, I'm sad," or "Mummy, I feel angry." And he's quite clear and will be able to express how he's feeling to me, which is great because it kind of helps me out with what's going on for him. But yeah, he can be a bit of a sod sometimes, actually. It's a bit of a nightmare. He knows what buttons to push, and he does push them quite a lot. I don't know if you've seen the film Elf, and he's in the lift and he presses all the buttons in the lift. That's my 4-year-old. That's Jacob. He's not not happy with just the one button. He pushes all of them.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Funny for me, not for you. I know. Oh my goodness. With those, always joke around when we meet babies, and I see them when they're very, very young, but when they're, really crying or, very full of personality, I'll just say, this is very good leadership potential. These are leadership skills. They are advocating for themselves. They have a strong personality. And like, try to, just bring a little bit of levity and humor and to cut the tension a little bit. But I used to say that to my husband, like our son, he was just such a powerful personality. And I thought, you know what, this is going to protect him from bullying. Maybe he'll advocate for friends on the schoolyard. And actually, I do notice that he comes home and he does say, oh, I shared with a friend, or we brought him into like playing group. So these, they're really, really hard now, but maybe they're the seeds of, strong leadership or character skills that will be really good for them as adults. And maybe that's just something that helps me sleep at night. But I do think there's something there.
I think you're right with that, because funny enough, even just yesterday, and I've noticed him doing it before, but Jacob will, like, we went to a birthday party last night and Jake came running over to me. He'd been playing in the soft play area. He suddenly came running over to me and he said, Mummy, there's a little girl crying because someone pushed her. It wasn't anything to do with him. It wasn't anything to do with me. I don't know the kid, but he felt comfortable enough to come over and advocate, like you say, for that child that had been hurt. And he came to me and told me, and he went and pointed out which one it was that had pushed her. And he's done that when he's been at school. He'll come home from school. I've seen him when I've been out at soft play with him. He'll actually go over when he knows the parents. So, for example, if we'd been, with you, for example, a soft play area, and something had happened to your son and he knew you, he's gone over to them and to the parents and tapped them and said, something's going on with your son over there, and pointing it out. And so I do think you're right. He's very kind of in tune with what's going on. Yeah. So I think you probably do have a point with that.
Well, and that's some really great parenting on your part, because, whether it's nature, nurture, definitely can't, it's really hard, I think, to teach those soft emotional intelligence skills, and for that to be in their nature, and just a little, if you see those little pearls so young, I feel that that's just a beautiful thing for character later on in life. So well done.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't feel like it all the time, but I do feel like I'm failing consistently. But I think that's just a parenting thought that we all have. But going back to the sort of the journaling and kind of the positivity kind of thing from your side, do you think that your role when you were working in intensive care, do you think your sort of nursing experience and specifically intensive care kind of helped you shape how you kind of manage stressful moments in your family life, like rather than someone that may have worked in an office, for example, because you've had such a stressful job? Do you think that has kind of helped you cope with it a little bit better in stressful situations at home and with your kids?
That's a really great question. I would say definitely, being able to figure out how to triage problems or anticipate things. In ICU nursing, we do a lot of critical thinking where we're anticipating outcome A, B, and C, and how do I prepare for these things, or even just planning and managing. That became really ingrained early. Even simple things like when you go out on an outing and you get back home, you repack the diaper bag right away instead of waiting till the morning that you're leaving to repack it. You always want to be ready for a situation. That situational awareness is something that we definitely use in nursing. I would say too, being able to de-escalate situations, especially when we've taken training with managing mental health crises, and those adult psychology pearls really extend to child psychology, which is that connect before you direct, de-escalate before you try to, redirect the situation. Those are all things I think that can be very helpful. And even things like complex wound care in adults with, incontinence rashes from briefs and lying in bed. I was very quickly able to transfer that to managing diaper rashes in children. Yeah. So there was a lot of great synergy that prepared me for it. And I think it's the anticipation and kind of what do I need to know to manage this situation better was really helpful.
Yeah. Those without again wanting to risk offending anyone, but there are a lot of similarities between the sort of the geriatric side of care and babies. They're very kind of similar in their needs as to what they can and can't do for themselves a lot of the time. So probably working in that kind of sector of intensive care has probably done you quite a lot for raising a child, really, or a baby anyway. And with regards to your business, so going back to your business before I finish, after you've been working on your business and you've had a long week at work, what would you say your favourite family activity is that kind of helps you rewind and reconnect with your family and together after a busy week at work?
I would say we definitely try to plan outings on weekends to spend time with the kids, especially when they're in daycare or school. I think that just planning some family time is really important. So we do things like going to farms and petting zoos and things that are outdoors that just let the kids run free and do their thing, or even planning play dates with their friends and carving out that socializing time as a family is important. We do enjoy ice cream as a family and going out to our local ice cream shop. Even things like kicking the ball around and playing soccer, just being able to really give each child a little bit of one-on-one time with each parent, I think is really important to nurture that bond. And especially where my daughter's younger and she nursed for a lot longer, I spent a lot more time with her. And my son, William, was able to vocalize and say, you spend so much more time with Scarlett. And now I'm trying to make sure that he knows he's also a priority. So I think just keeping it really simple, planning outings, planning play dates with friends, spending one-on-one time and switching up the parent prioritization. I think especially with two children or multiple children, there's always kind of parents who stick with one. Like my husband is often with my son and I'm often with my daughter. And I don't know why that is. I think it's just mom is usually with the younger child. I think making sure that we're intentional about switching it up and making them feel really special. And we call it Mommy William time. So I'll say, hey, do you want to go to the store with me for some Mommy William time? Then now he'll actually say, Mama, I want some Mommy William time. And that's his, being able to plant the seeds of that language is really good for our family. It's different for everybody, but that works for us.
I like that. Yeah. Being able to spend, I think, like you say, I've only got the one myself, but I've got a stepdaughter and we've just we started last month where it was just for me to go out with her. And all we do, like I say, she's 10, coming up to 10 in January. So all I do is I take her to the local Primark. We go and we have I treat her to a new top or something in Primark, and then we'll go and she likes going to Starbucks because she's getting to that age where she, wants to go and have coffees and things like this. And
cute.
So I take her to Starbucks afterwards. And I think, like you say, it's important to have that time where because it's predominantly me with my son and my husband is with his daughter, and we just kind of, that's how it is. I think it's important, like you say, to kind of swap it occasionally and have the other parent be involved with the other child, so it's not very one-sided all the time. Because I don't think that's good for anyone, really. Having a bit of a balance there.
You sound like such a great, step parent with your blended family. And I know I grew up with a stepdad and he had passed away. And after he had passed, I learned of this term and really wish that I used it with him. But I love the shift in blended families where they're saying bonus dad or bonus daughter.
Yeah.
Still honoring that it is like a blended family situation, hearing that you're like a bonus mom is
that's what
cool.
That's what my stepdaughter calls me. She calls me when she writes to dad and bonus mom. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely that warms really my heart so much. Oh, that's so cool.
No, she's lovely. So what advice, to end on them, what advice would you give to other parents who might be considering starting a business or going on to further education like you've done while raising a family? What's the one thing that you would kind of go back and say to yourself if you could?
Well, this actually kind of leans into the question just before where you said, what did I learn from ICU? And that's, life is precious, life is short, and things can happen in an instant that changes your life trajectory. It could be, a stroke, a heart attack, And so what I would say is if it's going to make you happy, do it, lean into it. But also if you feel like you're going to be missing out on certain things with your kids, then, trust that instinct as well. Just try to figure out what's most important to you that, at the end of your life, you'll say, gosh, I'm so glad I did that. Whether it's having really strong family bonds or launching a business, it's part of pulling in that legacy work, because our legacy is really all the chapters of our life as it goes on, the lifespan. Being able to think at the end of your life, gosh, I'm so glad I did this. And, whether it's contributing to society or changing politics or whatever the case might be, whatever you feel is important to you. And that might change over time too. You might start a business and say, this isn't for me. And that's not a failure. It's just a pivot. Or vice versa. Some people want to stay at home and it's just not for them. So then they want to get back into the workforce. I think just reevaluating what is giving me purpose, what is making me happy, and not sticking around for things that aren't making you happy, because life is way too short. And, these things can change from day to day.
I love that. I think that's a really nice note to end on there, I think, Carly. What is my purpose and what is making me happy? I like that to sort of end on. I think that might be the title of the show, actually.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you, Carly, for coming on. Do you want to tell everyone where they can come and find you and get a bit more information from you and connect with you?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, if you would like to follow me at Ace Planning Co. on Instagram, that same tag is for all of my socials, but Instagram is my most active. There you'll find some content about mom life, the sandwich generation, supporting aging parents, and just some relatable, lighthearted content on serious topics to help ease that transition into parent, caregiver phases of life. And or my website at aceplanningco.ca.
Lovely. And I will put all of Carly's details in the show notes for anyone that wants to come and find you and connect with you. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate talking to you. It's been lovely talking to you. And for anyone that listens to other podcasts out there, Carly is coming on to a client of mine's new podcast called For All Stages and Ages. So I'm going to give them a bit of a shout out as well. They are a parenting support company, and Carly is going to be coming on, I think on the 19th, we're recording for that one. So it's going to be coming soon on that podcast episode where she's going to be coming on and talking a little bit more in detail about the pediatric side of it, the lactation side of it. So if you want to come and get some more information, come and tune into that podcast as well to listen to Carly talk about that. So thank you again for coming on, Carly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation.
Thank you. And I will see you all next week.